Welcome to the Everything Electric podcast from EV Powered. I'm Matt Allen.
And I'm Richard Alvin. We're also going to be joined today, Matt, by Kevin Booker, who, along with Sam Clark, has piloted their Ford Mustang E to a total of 569.64 miles without a single charge, which actually breaks the previous world record, not by them, but it was set in China last year in September, of 563.97 miles. So people that moan that EVs have limited range, etc., I suggest you have a listen a bit later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matt, what's all this about the July new car registration saying that electric cars and hybrids actually make up 43% of new car registrations?
Yeah, we've just had the latest figures from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. Just trips off the tongue. But yeah, the SMMT put out their monthly data about new car registrations, and July was the 24th month of consecutive growth for the new car industry as a whole. But more importantly, it showed really encouraging numbers for electric cars. As you say, electrified vehicles, so that's battery electric, plug-in hybrids and full hybrids, made up 4 in 10 of all new registrations last month. Straightforward full hybrids were the biggest winners in that, but battery cars, so the stuff that we're most interested in, still 19% growth compared with the previous month. And it was only electrified cars that saw sales growth. Diesel was down, which we're kind of come to expect now. It's plummeting every month, but petrol was down last month as well. So BEVs, HEVs and FEVs were all up last month, which is encouraging. And I think looking at the numbers, I think they said just over 27,000 new battery electric vehicles were registered last month, which means there were only more petrol cars registered than electric cars last month, and that's going across the whole year as well. Looking back, it's the petrol's still out in the lead in terms of new registrations, but battery electric cars are not close behind, but they're getting closer, and they are sort of second biggest market now.
But who's actually buying these cars? Is it fleets? Is it private, normal consumers?
This is the problem that the SMMT has been flagging for a while now. It's fleets. Private sales are, in general, going downwards. So it's all fleet sales at the minute. I think fleet sales were up 13% last month, and private sales were down. Apart from, actually, and this is quite encouraging, apart from battery electric cars. So private retail sales of BEVs went up a whole 1%, which it's tiny, but it's an increase where elsewhere it's falling away. It's encouraging, and the fact that electric vehicle sales are going up, whether it's fleet or not, is good. But the SMMT is still making noises. It's still worried about the fact that not enough people, private buyers, are buying electric cars. We've got the ZEV mandate this year, which says 22% of everybody's sales have to be fully electric. At the minute, electric's at 18.5% market share. The SMMT have come out and said that they think it's going to be at 18.5% come the end of the year. So it's predicting that your manufacturers are going to miss this target, which comes with huge financial penalties. I think it's £15,000 a car manufacturers are going to be fined. What they can do this year, and what I think they can do next year, is they can steal from next year's allowance to cover the fact they're not going to hit these targets. But it's a slippery slope to get into. If you're having to steal allowance from another year, then you've got to make that up next year or the year after.
When we talk about fleet sales, though, I mean, there's been a societal change anyway, regardless of whether it's BEV, petrol, whatever, that barely anybody actually now goes into a dealership, test drive a car, haggles for the price, not that you get anything off anymore, and writes a check or does a bank transfer there and then to walk out with a V5 and the keys in your hand. Pretty much everybody now leases or buys a vehicle, or obtains a vehicle by some means of finance, whether it be personal contract hire, PCP, etc. So are some of these fleet sales figures actually being sort of masking that data, in so much as it's actually Ford Finance or Mercedes Finance or VW, Finance, etc., buying the vehicles, and they are still going into the private consumer market.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. I don't have the exact numbers, but I think that's exactly what it is. That, as you say, pretty much everybody buys on finance, and they're not buying. Most of them aren't buying for keeps, so they are buying cars on a 3-year deal, and these are all going through leasing firms. There's also sort of elements of salary sacrifice as well. It's a great way to get a tax break, is to use a workplace salary sacrifice to buy an EV, and yeah, they're not counted as private retail sales because again they're going through leasing companies and things. So actually, the SMMT is worried about private retail, but if, as you say, the way we're buying cars changes and actually the fleet market from these companies is picking that up, it's maybe not as disastrous as it maybe looks on the surface.
Yeah. And also, another way to actually entice people in is actually start to reduce and cut some of the prices. And I saw that Volvo's actually cutting the price of its EX30.
Yeah, yeah, they've just announced that they're knocking about £2,000 off. Well, they're not knocking £2,000 off. What they've done is they've introduced a new entry level spec, which brings the price down to 32,850 for the entry level one, which is £2,000 cheaper than the previous entry level one. And I think this is what we're seeing from manufacturers now, is that as part of this effort to try and hit the ZEV mandate, they're knocking prices down. We've had Fiat have done it with the 500 recently. Mazda did it. Honda have done it. Renault have quite a few brands have announced either that they're just knocking money straight off a car, or that they're introducing more entry level spec cars that have these lower list prices. I think, again, going back to this private retail uptick, these top line numbers aren't particularly relevant to the fleet buyers and to these 3-yearly deals. But if you're buying privately as a cash buyer, then they're trying to entice people in with these reductions.
Are these reductions and lowering the spec? Is that actually lowering the spec as well? We talked last week about I can't remember what the car was now, but a new lower level had been the area had been introduced, and it didn't have. All right, I'm going to sound a bit first world problems here, but it didn't have the button to close the boot, and it didn't have the heated steering wheel, etc., etc. Is Volvo going down that same route and having to close your own boot and I don't know, warm your own
Yeah, I think
hands
there's
up?
a bit of that with the EX30. They've introduced this new core range, which comes under the Ultra, which is the mid spec, I think, just to confuse things. But yeah, it is a lower spec. I think with the EX30 though, there's still a fairly decent level of kit. There's particularly for the money, and I think other people, Renault as well. I think with the Megane was recently announced price reduction, but that does bring a spec reduction. Volvo, interestingly, some of these you'll find that you only get the small battery. But Volvo, interestingly, they've kept the option, so you can have the sub £33,000 one, or you can pay an extra £3,500 and go for the bigger battery. So you can opt for that whilst keeping the lower spec. I think some of the other ones, like the Mazda MX-30, that was just a straight, we can't sell these, have £3,500 off it. And the Honda ENY1, anyone, whatever you want to call it, that's the same deal. Basically, it was, they kept the spec the same. They just somehow managed to knock £5,000 off the list price. So it's a mixed bag. It's a bit of both, depending on manufacturers.
Also, there's sort of change going on at Honda, Nissan, Mitsubishi. That unearthly alliance there. They've been left behind by China and Europe. The market's different in Japan. So, what are they planning to do to make sure they're not actually left behind, in the doldrums?
Yeah, it's funny. I think we knew Honda and Nissan had sort of dropped hints about this a few months ago, that they were looking at it, and they've now confirmed an alliance, and they've mentioned that Mitsubishi are coming in, and it's fundamentally to look at electric vehicles and to look at sort of next generation software defined vehicles. And yet it basically seems to be that they've suddenly looked around them and gone, oh God, everybody's building electric cars. What are we doing? And it is different in Japan. The market in Japan is different, and Japan, they're not alone. Mazda, Toyota as well have been very slow to to move to electric vehicles. They seem to think they have a different approach to how new energy vehicles are going to come about. But this seems to be that Honda and Nissan have realized that they need to move quickly, especially with the stuff that's coming out of China. Chinese manufacturers are moving at such a rate of knots that Honda and Nissan have realized they need to do something to catch up. And the easiest, maybe not the easiest, but the most straightforward way is for them to work together. So they're going to be developing battery tech together, and they're going to be sourcing batteries from the same people. The plan being that these batteries will then be interchangeable between Hondas and Nissans. Same with motors, drivetrain components. They're looking at making the whole e-axle something that's interchangeable between vehicles and between Honda vehicles, Nissan vehicles. I confess I don't know what Mitsubishi's role in all of this is. I mean, Mitsubishi's dead in the UK already, and I don't really see what it's bringing. Obviously, Honda's got an EV strategy, and Nissan has EV experience like very few other mainstream manufacturers. So they're bringing something. I don't know what Mitsubishi's bringing to this, but be interesting to see how it pans out and whether they can catch up.
Yeah. And talking about partnerships, there's also a very weird partnership between VW and Ford emerging as well.
Yeah, the latest part of this is the new Volkswagen Transporter that's just been revealed, the new T7, and it's, you want to be cruel, it's a Transit with a Volkswagen badge on the front. There's a little bit more to it than that, I would say, but yeah, it's all part of this partnership that Ford and the Volkswagen Group have got. So we had the Explorer chatted about that before. That is a Ford body, Ford interior, but it's on a Volkswagen MEB platform. If you look at the Ford Courier, it's a Volkswagen Caddy underneath, and then Volkswagen Amarok is a Ford Ranger, and it's cost saving. They're working together to develop these platforms. Ford's taking the commercial vehicle side of it, and then they're borrowing from Volkswagen's passenger side. So yeah, the Transporter is technically, mechanically the same as the new Transit. You're going to get the same choice of motors. But Volkswagen actually interesting has said that they're going to do a four-wheel drive version. So they'll do an all-motion version, which Ford, as far as I know, haven't mentioned. And they've also said they're going to do a small battery, cheaper version for doing deliveries, which is again, something that we've not heard from Ford. So it seems that even within this partnership, even within the technology they've got, they are finding ways to differentiate the two vehicles.
Excellent. That's probably an opportune time to take a break, pay some bills, and we'll come back with your interview with Kevin Booker, talking about how he got the Guinness World Records for his Ford Mustang Mach-E single drive.
I'm really pleased to say that we're joined by Kevin Booker today. Now, Kevin, the last time I spoke to you, which wasn't that long ago, you were the holder of 4 Guinness World Records for various electric car efficiency and driving achievements. Now you've got 5, haven't you?
Yeah, managed to tot up another one a couple of weekends ago.
So just want to tell us what it is you've got this time and talk us through it a little bit.
So this one is the longest distance to a single charge in the Ford Mustang Mach-E, getting 500 and just over 569 miles to a single charge.
Right. So that is the world record for the longest distance traveled in any electric car.
Yeah. So any production car.
Any production car, yeah. Fantastic. And I know obviously we spoke before, you've done Land's End to John O'Groats, and you've done the record in the van and stuff. But what was different about this record attempt? So obviously, I think with Land's End to John O'Groats, you've got a fairly obvious plan. You're going from John O'Groats to Land's End. You're going from the top of the country to the bottom of the country. You know the route. This seemed to be slightly different sort of setup.
Yeah. So Guinness now have made the rules so that if you're doing a distance event, you have to do it from point A to point B. And obviously for these sort of things, you want to try and stick to the flattest part of the country, because you don't want to give yourself a disadvantage by going up massive hills. So we ended up doing it, starting at Gridserve in Norwich, and then plotting a sort of massive, kind of almost like U-shape, upside down U-shaped loop all the way around and then back down to finish kind of in the area of Norwich, just so that the AA, when we did eventually run out could rescue us and take us back to grid serve to charge.
Okay, so you had them on standby just to, so you could use every last ounce of the battery then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So we didn't actually come to a stop totally though. Again, like the van record, we did need to upload the data. So that is triggered by an ignition off sequence. So once we've broken the record, we did stop. But I think we probably could have got a little bit further because it just kept going. It didn't have any loss of performance. It would still do 30 miles an hour with it saying that the battery was depleted. So I think it had still a fairly big buffer. I mean, if personally, I would have liked to take it to 573 miles, because then it would have been 200 miles over WLTP for the car, and that's a nice round figure.
Yeah, because yeah, that's the amazing thing. So, yeah, the Mustang's got about 373 official range, hasn't it?
That's
and
right.
you did the best part of 200 extra miles.
Yeah,
that's pretty impressive. So, at what point did you exceed the official range of the Mustang? How far through the drive? How long into the drive did you do that?
pretty much near the end. So near the end of the sort of 24 hours, and we did, have brakes out of the car when I had a brake and Sam had a brake, just to make sure that we complied to all the sort of health and safety stuff.
Yeah, but it's still quite an undertaking to spend that long in a car, just driving with, I don't with an end in sight, but still without a sort of fixed final destination, just to keep going until you couldn't go any further.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a challenge at the end. When the car said 0%, it obviously said 0%, quite a distance away from what we needed for the record. So let's just say the last 21 miles are probably the tensest drive I've ever done.
So you got a fair distance when the car was insisting that it couldn't go any further then?
Yeah, so it's the first time I've ever seen tortoise mode on a Mustang Mach-E. Makes me think we could have done even better on the John O'Groats to Land's End thing, because we never got it that empty.
So talking about the Mustang, why is it that you went for the Mustang again? Is that a sort of familiarity thing, or?
Generally, the Mustang's it's almost got the biggest battery with the efficiency. We looked at lots of other cars with bigger batteries, but I think the Mustang kind of sits there still in the middle, where it's got a very efficient powertrain, and with the 91 kilowatt hour usable battery pack, it's got a big enough battery pack as well.
Okay, yeah, so it gives you that balance of having the capacity, but also using the capacity quite well.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, because we average 6.25 miles per kilowatt hour.
What's the official in the Mustang? It must be 3.5.
Be whatever 373 divided 91 is.
But yeah, it's certainly not 6 and a bit, is it?
Yeah. I think it's around about 4.8 or something like that. 4 point something.
So
I actually think 4.8 is slightly above it, but it genuinely delivers 4.8 without trying.
Yeah, but that's with you driving it, perhaps not with me or Richard at the wheel. But like this one again, I think last time I spoke to you, you said the John O'Groats one, it was not easy, but you were fairly confident in what you were doing and how you could achieve it. Was this one different because you didn't have that sort of comfort of being able to, you knew with John O'Groats to Land's End, you knew you were going to stop to charge. This one you knew you couldn't. So was it a little bit more sort of nerve-wracking?
I mean, the difficulty is it's very difficult to test these routes, because obviously to test them, it takes so long now. I mean, it was easy in the days when cars would only do about 100 miles. You could do a couple of tests in a day if you needed to. But now they do, 500 miles plus. You just can't test these. So you have to just do it via the numbers and kind of do shorter range tests and look at how the percentages work. But percentage gauges aren't linear either. So there's always a chance you might do it, might not do it. And we thought, when it said 0 at 21 miles before the end, we genuinely thought we weren't going to make it.
Yeah, as you say, you can't predict exactly how it's going to perform right down to that point where it hits 0 on the indicator, can you?
Yeah.
So I mean, Richard was just having technical difficulties, but Richard's popped me a message asking, can you explain just how you achieve that from a driving point of view? You said obviously the car is very efficient and it's got the big battery, but still, nobody else is getting an extra 200 miles out of that car. So what is it you do? How do you drive in such a way that you can achieve that?
So preparation is the one thing. One of the things is to make sure you've got the A-rated tyres, which were what we used the Bridgestone ones for. We were on the 18-inch wheels, so we didn't have the upgraded posh sort of black alloy wheels. We were on the standard wheels. The main thing is kind of resisting that temptation to accelerate fast, so it's almost the patience you need to just accelerate like a normal car and accelerate really gently.
Yeah.
You know, the cars used to take sort of 16, 17 seconds, 0 to 60. It's only now that they're all sort of sub 6-second cars. So it's that thing. And then sort of reading the road ahead. So if you can see a hill going down the hill, you just ease off a bit and let gravity and it's all about balancing that sort of throttle versus the contours of the road and reading the road ahead.
Yeah, it's sort of normal driving skills. It's not specifically EV driving skills necessarily.
No, you could do exactly the same in a petrol car.
Yeah. But actually, do you use the sort of brake regeneration then, or do you find that gets in the way of your anticipation? Because obviously most people think you switch the regen on and that's going to give you more range, isn't it? But
yeah, the problem with the regen is it can't read the road ahead in front of you. So you do need to do that manually. And this is the key in cars that if you've driven the Mustang, you'll find there's quite an obvious transition between the regen braking and the real brakes.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, you've got to be on it to be able to feather that brake so that you're using the regen, not the actual physical brakes, which can be quite difficult.
Yeah, so it's easier to do that yourself rather than letting.
Yeah. Because one pedal mode, you tend to be fighting against the throttle. So you're fighting against the braking. So you end up being more bursty on it than putting your foot down more to overcome it.
Yeah. So again, obviously that's going to ruin your efficiency.
Yeah.
So do you think, I don't know, as you said, you're back in the old days when there was maybe 100, 150 mile range in a car, there was, you weren't going to get these distances. Do you think that with these new batteries, with the improved efficiency, that this kind of thing is getting any easier? Or is it just that the distances you can go are going to get longer and longer?
In a way, it's getting easier to get the distance, but it's getting harder to do the records because the bit that's going to fail on the endurance side is the people driving it. You know, that's probably at the limit you could do with 2 drivers, even with us going out for a break. You know, between me and Sam, we did most of the driving. We had Richard Parker from Webfleet navigating while one of us was taking a break in the other car. But it's just those sort of distances, you're going to need more and more drivers to do that.
Yeah.
And the problem you have in the UK is you're going to run out of a flat bit of the UK. So I think to get much further, these records, you're going to have to start wandering into Europe and finding the sort of flatter, longer roads in Europe, because the UK is not the ideal one with its twisty, hilly roads, to be fair.
No, it's not necessarily conducive to most efficient driving, is it? Is that something you think about then? It's venturing further afield and trying records overseas, or?
Yeah, that's I mean, one which I've always liked to do to see how far you could get is something like Route 66 in the States, or one of the big European kind of routes. Again, it's one of those things with all these records, you kind of need sponsors to support it. So it's always trying to find the sponsors, and for a big European or a big sort of American event, you'd have to have sponsors that are relevant in those countries, which is always the difficult thing to find.
Yeah. So the last couple you've done, you've worked with Webfleet, haven't you? They've they've done all the telemetry and things.
Yeah, and that's crucial for proving these records, is that data. Without that data, you kind of can't really go just on the trip computer. So it's all about having advanced data techniques to actually show where you've been.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because I noticed that you were. I watched the video that Sam posted of the drive, and I noticed you guys spent a bit. Whenever you took a break, you were out of the car, you were looking at the data on the laptops, And so what are you seeing in that your average driver doesn't see on the little dash top display?
So it's, I mean, the percentage of the battery we're seeing, so we can see how sort of far they're going. And that's one of the nerve-wracking things when you're out with a car trying to rest. You really have to resist the temptation to look at the percentage of the battery in the car, because you can see that. You can see how well or not well they're doing.
Yeah.
So that's a big temptation. And the other thing is it shows driving style. And actually, if you looked between the driving of me and Sam, it's just a diagonal line. You couldn't really tell. There's no difference between how quickly one of us was running the battery out to the other.
So this is quite interesting. You can compare between drivers and things. But obviously, the two of you, I mean, you and Sam hold the record for the van as well together, don't you? So clearly, there's a style for driving that's conducive to that. You've both got it.
Yeah. Sam can switch it off and on as well, so he can choose to drive not in an efficient way or to drive in an efficient way.
Yeah. Okay. Richard's asking, yeah, so what does a sponsorship cost? How much, what are you looking at in terms of money from a sponsor to arrange something like this?
I mean, when you say it's in multiple thousands to do any Guinness World Record, it's not, none of them are cheap. It's because you have to get all the things in a row. So none of these things you can really do without a sponsor.
No. Just,
the cost of having Webfleet to do all that data analysis would be probably out of the reach of an individual, because you've got people on site. It's very different to just the normal. If you've got the telematics provided in your sort of standard fleet, it's not that level. They're producing reports and everything else.
Yeah, it's much more kind of granular data.
Yeah,
that lets you sort of So on your drive, were you using that to sort of adjust how you were driving, or was it more just letting you know where you were heading?
Letting us know where we were, basically. It was more reading the road conditions and using we had orders put into the Webfleet's data, because we had to do a pre-described route. So we weren't, the Guinness rules now, or guidelines say, you can't cross over yourself. And there were 2 bits of the route where you got very close to where you'd been. So you didn't want to make one mistake. And that's where, again, the Webfleet sort of navigation tools were crucial to show us where we needed to turn. The other thing is trying to plot the route. We had to plot it we plotted it based on sort of slower roads and cycle roads, which are not necessarily always roads. Yeah. So there were some times where that Webfleet system really helped us out when our route was trying to take us down a cycle road. It's like, well, we can't go that way, and it rerouted, and that dynamic routing was really useful.
So even though you've done all that preparation in advance, all that planning and sort of choosing your route, you still have sort of tricky situations once you're out there on the road.
Well, I mean, if you watch the video, see, we had to move a tree out of the way that fallen in the middle of the road. It's like, how could you do that? And the jury's still out on what sort of large bird flew in front of us. So
it's like, it's not just the road and the weather. You're contended with wildlife and the horticulture and everything.
That's right.
So have you got anything else lined up, or are you now just having a break from it?
We've got a few ideas. It's just trying to, again, find backers for those ideas. Stuff, because we've kind of done the ones that are fairly straightforward to do. So now they get a bit more ambitious and bigger. So sort of the bigger they are, the more kind of sponsorship you need to kind of get these things. So you're looking then at multiple partners.
Yeah.
So if you did a Europe one, you'd need the equivalent to the AA in Europe, because you always need those, because the AA are not there just to help us when we run out. They're there as the professional witnesses to make sure we haven't tampered with the car. Because I've seen some of the news outlets, you see some of the comments that people have said, things like, it must have been a stripped out prototype, and it's like, it is just genuinely a standard Mustang Mach-E, and that's what the AA are there for, to ensure that we haven't added any weird batteries or anything like that. So they're there to say this is just a standard Mach-E. So this is no different to anyone that you could buy off the shelf in a Ford dealer.
Really, so it is that, as you say, you've put the A-rated tires on, specified the little wheels, and apart from that, it's absolutely stock car.
Yeah. So it's whatever anyone could do. I mean, you'd probably find nobody would generally specify the smaller wheels because people like big wheels and they do have an effect on efficiency.
Yeah, I think we've spoken about that before, haven't we? About the Hyundai who don't sell the 18-inch wheels on the Ioniq 6 over here.
Yeah.
It robs it of 50 miles of range or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've actually compared the new Kona to the new Kona on the the big wheels, the 19-inch wheels on a press car, and I've driven a fleet vehicle on the 17s, and I know with the 17s I've been getting 380 miles out of Hyundai Kona.
Yeah,
and I couldn't do that out of the one on the 19s.
So that's another sort of tip for people who are looking at EVs, isn't it? If it's about aesthetics, then you go for the big shiny wheels and things. But actually, if you want to get the most out of your battery, you go for the little wheels, the lower end.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Yeah. No, it's really good to hear from you again. Good to speak to you, and yeah, congratulations on yet another record. So we'll keep an eye out for what's next.
Yeah, I know they are getting much more ambitious. Will always be the difficulty is how you do, and it's the time they take. As EVs get much longer range, there's a lot more prep required for them. So I mean, the next challenge is actually doing Leamani Cup the weekend, which is this sort of an efficiency thing with cars from the last 100 years, which I've done a number of times in various cars. So it's back in a Mustang in Webfleet livery. But so I'm actually driving that with Alex Grant. So
very good.
So I'm dragging another motoring journalist along.
Excellent. We'll look out to see how you get on with that. But I mean, really appreciate you taking time to speak to us again, Kevin.
That's no problem.
Very much. Yeah. So that was Kevin Brooker. It's really good to have a chat with him and just get the lowdown on what's involved in undertaking a challenge like that. I mean, every time I speak to Kevin, I get a little bit depressed that he's managing to get 6 and a bit kilowatt hours out of a car. And I sit my American, I'm chuffed if I can get 3.5. I don't know about you.
Your right foot's too heavy, Matt. That's the problem. However, there is the possibility of another way of getting more miles for a speedier charge time. Xpeng have actually looking to launch an 800 kilowatt charger, which adds 180 miles in 5 minutes. What's all that about?
Yep. So this is the latest thing from Xpeng. We don't get Xpeng cars here, but they're settling in Europe already, and they're big in China. And in China, they also do infrastructure. They don't just do cars. And this is latest, and they demonstrated a few weeks ago this 800 kilowatt charger, which, as you say, is going to add knocking on for 200 miles in 5 minutes. At which point, charging stop being a worry at all. I think it's interesting that we're kind of at that stage already. It's not that long ago where anything that could charge 150 kilowatts was unusual. Now we're looking at, okay, we don't have the cars that can do 800 kilowatt yet, but they're coming. And I think this is Xpeng future-proofing the infrastructure by announcing this. I mean, as far as I know, we're not going to see these here anytime soon. It's for the Chinese domestic market, but it's just another sign of where the industry is going. We have these chargers, and I was with Nissan a few weeks ago, and they were talking about solid-state batteries, and this is where we're going. Once we get into solid-state batteries, they will be able to charge 800 kilowatts, potentially even higher than that. And that's to have the infrastructure in place ready to support that is going to be important, because you don't want to be playing catch up. You don't want to have these cars that theoretically can do this, but actually you have no availability to do it.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Matt, did you hear that there's been a miracle in America?
Go on.
Donald Trump, who we spoke about last week, and I think probably the week before, because he hates electric cars. Supporters of electric cars should, and I quote, rot in hell. Says that they are assisting the nascent industry in lunacy. Has somewhat shifted his views this week. Yeah, he actually said, and I quote, "I'm for electric cars." Now he says that, and he then goes on, and I will then extrapolate the quote. I'm for electric cars. I have to be because Elon has endorsed me very strongly. And when we say Elon Musk, the world's richest man, has endorsed him, yes, he has endorsed him. He's planning, he hasn't started yet, but he's planning to donate 45 million a month to a super PAC completely focused on getting Trump elected. Trump has declined not to clarify too much detail, and so has Musk. But basically, Trump has to be nice, play nice about electric cars now, because basically, well, frankly, I think I'd probably say whatever you like for 45 million a month. But yes, so 45 million a month for the next couple of months between now and November the 6th for the elections, and yeah, that's quite interesting. So that we may still see a bit of a sea change on electric vehicles in the US.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. As you say, I think this idea that you can be rant and rave against something and hate it with every fibre of your being, up to the point that somebody goes, "Here's a load of money," and then suddenly you just change your tune. It's about as sincere as anything else that man says. But you never know. It might help promote EVs in the US.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get some of the MAGA supporters to support it, then who knows? But pretty much whatever Trump comes out of Trump's mouth is accepted and adopted. So we'll have to just wait and see. But
this is true.
Could be a masterstroke by Elon Musk, who I have to say, at the moment is getting lambasted by Keir Starmer and many others for the stance that X is now taking for the riots and stuff going on in the UK. So, case of watching that space.
Yeah.
Talking about watching this space, Formula E does appear to be in a little bit of trouble at the moment. In so much as, we've come to the end of the season, amazing season finale in London a couple of weeks ago. Mahindra and 4 other current manufacturers have not actually signed up yet to the new Gen 4 rules. So Mahindra, along with the 2 Stellantis brands, and Maserati as well, have a special agreement, obviously, with the sister brand DS. ERT they've actually missed the deadline for registering their interest and joining the Gen 4 generation of cars. So that's slightly worrying. There's nothing from Formula E about anything. So we would just have to hope that people didn't file the right paperwork in time, and everything is okay. Because 4 teams exiting, Formula E will actually be a big jump. I know that Mahindra, have had a lean couple of seasons actually on track, and also their interest in the sport hasn't been helped by the fact that the board weren't very happy with the cancellation of the Hyderabad, the home Grand Prix. Part of the reason why you get involved in something like Formula E is as a glorified marketing tool. So if you're not actually marketing to your home audience, that's clearly going to annoy you. So, but that's just a case of let's keep an eye on that. And also, go on, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, as you say, Mahindra, perhaps they're losing interest in it a bit. But some of the other brands, we would have expected them to confirm this, because we've been getting announcements about Maserati have been announcing new drivers and all sorts. So that indicates that surely they're planning on coming back. As you say, they've maybe just not sent the right bit of paperwork in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, talking about drivers, it's definitely driver roundabouts, and change, stop and when the music stops, basically, over there. So Jaguar have decided to stick, as you would rightly do, with Mitch Evans and Nick Cassidy, who both painfully just missed out of London to actually win the whole thing. Taking 14 podiums between them with 4 victories. So they'll both be back for more. Maserati, whilst they may not be technically in the thing, they've actually signed drivers, so let's assume they are. They've taken DS Penske outcast and Aston Martin driver Stoffel Vandoorne, who's going to join former McLaren man Jake Hughes. Maximilian Günther is moving away from Maserati to Sylvain Vandoorne's seat at DS, alongside John-Eric Verne. Porsche, unsurprisingly, have decided to keep the reigning world champion Pascal Wehrlein after his dramatic title win back in London. He's going to be joined by Antonia Phillips da Costa. So he retains his seat for the 3rd season in a row. Mahindra, whilst they haven't actually technically said they're joining, they have actually got retained Nick de Vries and Eduardo Montara as well. So in theory, for a strong driver pairing in 2025. So yeah, Jake Dennis is staying in his multi-year deal with Andretti, with Oliver Rowland, still staying at Nissan as well after that first strong season with that last race win. So it's really only ERT, Envision, and McLaren are yet to confirm all their drivers. So it does look like Sam Bird, Sebastian Buemi, Robert Frins, all experienced drivers are expected to be back on the grid in some way, shape, or form. But we could be seeing some new drivers, some new blood. So Johan Derulva, NATO, Norman NATO, Dane Ticktum, and Sergio Setta Camara, along with Sasha Venestras, are all waiting in the wings for what hopefully should be what the future holds there. So Nicola Müller was linked to a move for Porsche in the midst of the Felix da Costa moving out with his struggles, but clearly Porsche decided to stay where they are, so which is good. So it does mean that some real new blood of Taylor Barnard, Paul Aaron, Kayla Collette have all made their debuts are all set to make their debuts in Formula E last season. So let's just have to see what happens, really. But could be all change.
Interesting times ahead, then.
Yeah, and hopefully Nick de Vries this time round can actually do slightly better. But it does once again go to what we were saying last week, that Formula E is a different beast as a vehicle to drive with that instant torque, and speeds not far off, if not the same, possibly even faster than a Formula One car. So it really, it's a different top level of tier of single-seater motorsport. Definitely not a second tier of any way, shape, or form to Formula One. So, talking about charging as we were just now before we meandered off to motorsport. The Department of Transport has actually published some stats about where the chargers are and where we are and what we still need to be doing, etc., etc. Apparently, London and bizarrely Scotland are leading the way.
This is the latest DFT figures, which the DFT claims them, but they seem to be using ZapMap data. To give ZapMap their due, they seem to be tracking. DFT borrows the numbers, but they publish quarterly results or quarterly figures on where the charging infrastructure is. And the good news is charging infrastructure is growing as we would expect it. It's growing slower than it has done in the past. I think it's gone up 8% in the last quarter, which is slightly slower than the start of the year. But there's been nearly 5,000 new chargers put in across the country, which means we've now got 64,500 public. These are public chargers, obviously, which is still a 47% jump over the middle of last year. But as you say, the numbers they paint a mixed picture for the country in terms of chargers per population, per head of population. London is miles ahead, perhaps as you'd expect. You would expect the capital to have invested and have sort of more provision. But the UK average, this is per 100,000 people. This is charger per 100,000 people. UK average is 95.5. London has 233 chargers per 100,000. Now, most of those are slow curbside chargers. But as you say, Scotland is actually the second best provisioned part of the country. It's got 103 chargers for every 100,000 people, and actually more of those are fast chargers. There's a higher proportion of fast chargers in Scotland per person than elsewhere. That's great news if you live in London. It's great news if you live in Scotland. It means you're not going to be struggling to find a charger. Although, having experienced ChargePlace Scotland's network, you might be struggling to find one that works or that accepts a charge card. That's not always the strong point. Anyway, the problem is that at least in Scotland we have options. If you look at Northern Ireland, they've got very, very little. It's, you know, the one thing that comes out of this table is there are some places that are really struggling still. Northern Ireland's got 32 chargers for every 100,000 people. It's a third of the national average. And then there are other areas, you know, I think the Yorkshire and the Humber and the northwest of England as well, really struggling. They've got less than 60 per person. And it's an issue that if it's not addressed soon, I think it's going to cause problems. You know, people will be put off if they look at it and don't see chargers around, and they don't see chargers when they're considering making a switch. It's going to put them off. Whereas if you drive here, there, everywhere, and you see chargers dotted about, it gives you confidence in the infrastructure. It gives you confidence that you can make journeys without hassle. So it's something that needs to be addressed. I think is this uneven distribution.
Yeah, and speaking about that and giving confidence, etc. I was in Paris for the Olympics at the back end of last week, and I know, you know, when you did your family holiday in France, you were talking about you know, how plentiful the chargers were, etc., etc. And I have to say, anecdotally, and I haven't looked up the stats, etc., to know the per thousand you know, residents, etc. But there were a lot of chargers around, albeit, you know, probably comparatively slow. Aside, you know, curbside chargers. However, they were also very cost-effective chargers, averaging, so, you know, 25 cents, you know, per kilowatt hour versus ours at, you know, my Ionity and etc., 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 doing, you know, 75 to, well, anywhere between about 65 to 85 over here. So, you know, that's, you know, we definitely need to be embracing some of our European ex-brothers with you know, the future of electric charging.
Yeah, this thing, I think even with, there were numbers coming out a couple of weeks ago talking about the different charging rates. And I think even the cheapest curbside charging in the UK is pretty much twice what you're seeing in France. And it's another element of what we need to do. We need to encourage people into electric cars. For those, as you know, we've spoken about this before, that for people who charge at home, you can get a wall box installed, you're laughing because you pay pennies for your electricity. But for the people who live in flats, live in terraces, who don't have off-street parking, there needs to be a cheap, affordable, accessible way to charge their car. And whether that's costs that are 25 pence a kilowatt hour, or whether it's supermarkets and leisure centres and things, having cheap, slow charges that people can just plug into for an hour or two, that's, you know, there needs to be more done, I think, to boost that.
Talking about boosting, we've actually got a couple of new car launches.
We have. I am off on Friday to drive the new Porsche Taycan, which will be interesting. I drove the pre-facelift version not that long ago, but this new one has everything you expect. It has more power, it has more range. So that'll be an interesting one, and it's just up the road from me, so that'll be good. And you have to drive something slightly different, I believe.
Yeah, I'm going to drive the new Moke. So yes, the original Mini Moke designed by Sir Alex Izagonis, but then became military vehicle and changed its course in the future. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, but also further afield, Aehra have revealed the names of their first two cars as well.
They have. This is an Italian brand. It's a brand. They haven't actually built anything yet, but they've announced the names of the first two cars. We're going to get we're going to get an SUV, predictably, and a luxury saloon. So the Impeto will be the SUV, and the Estasi is the new saloon. And they will both, apparently, the plan is they'll be built at a 1.2 billion euro factory that's going to be built in Italy if things go according to plan.
That sounds quite a large investment.
Yeah.
Where have they found 1.2 billion down the back of the sofa from?
Well, they haven't yet. This is why I've got my slightly cynical hat on. They've gone cap in hand to the Italian government looking for help to build this factory. I mean, they're talking a good fight. You know, they have this grand plan. They know what they want to do. They're talking about creating 650 jobs between the factory and their own HQ in Milan. And you know, we should never say never. The car industry is littered with brands that make these bold proclamations and never come to anything. But we do get them. Tesla came out of absolutely nowhere, and you look at where they are now. Rimac as well. You'd think 15 years ago, everybody sort of looked at this weird little Croatian company going, we're going to build an 1800 horsepower electric car. It's going to be amazing. And you would look at that and think, it's not going to happen. And it has. And they're selling their expertise to other people. I still just wonder whether we'll ever actually see the Estasi or the Impeto arrive, especially seeing as, I think Aehra are talking about ambition of building 25,000 cars a year. To put that in context, that's twice what Bentley built last year. And you think Bentley has the might of the Volkswagen Group behind it. And if they're only shipping 12,000, are we really going to see 25,000 cars come out of this factory that isn't actually there yet? And also they're talking about this, your production starting in 2 years, but they haven't broken ground on the factory yet. As I say, maybe I'm being cynical, but I have my doubts.
Yeah, and I think asking the Italian government for money for an electric, maybe they've had some sort of epiphany and they are going to more embrace electric vehicles, etc. in Italy. But Italy's most famous motor manufacturer, Ferrari, have just announced the launch of their new car, and not a single I wouldn't say not a single hydrocarbon is going to be burnt, but in fact lots of hydrocarbons are going to be burnt, because talking about the names of these new cars here, Ferrari once again have hit the nail on the head with an obvious name for their car. The one before was La Ferrari, and the new one is called 12 Cylindri, i.e. it's got 12 cylinders. It's very mean and powerful and rah. It's not hybrid, it's not anything. It's full on petrol and 12 cylinders of prancing horse behind you.
Yeah.
So I think for the Italian government to now be trying to say, oh yes, no, we are going to embrace the electric vehicles. We're going to give you 1.2 billion. I think the only way you're going to get 1.2 billion from the Italian government is if you get Michael Caine out of retirement and you get a couple of fully electric minis on the case and steal it from the government. But anyway, so they, with after suggesting that people break the law in Italy, let's wrap up this week. So we've already said what we're driving this week. We'll come back with an interview with some of the team behind the new Mach-E, which is being built in Britain as part of next week's podcast. So I think from Matt and myself, we look forward to seeing you next Thursday, or hearing from us next Thursday. And please don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you hear your podcasts.
You can find more episodes of the Everything EV podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.